You have a series that is taking a video game that was already so cinematic and doing its own thing with it. This is a masterful recreation, adaptation, whatever you want to call this, going down different paths. I love The Last of Us Part 2 so much, and to see what they've done with this season only makes me even more excited to see where things are going to go in season 3 and season 4.
It's just fantastic. It is done so well. It takes what we already know and gives us a little bit of a twist. It lets us know that, hey, you're not always safe when you love a game and when you know where a game is about to go. It's got brilliant performances, and it continues to be one of the most appointment-driven shows that you need to be watching.
It just shatters all expectations. I think for someone who's played this game religiously, it adds enough surprises that you really feel fully immersed. They're doing it so good. I'm letting them cook, like let these guys cook. And you're just going to be like, man, this is a phenomenal season.
Hello and welcome to the movie podcast review of The Last of Us Season 2. Don't worry, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, we are staying spoiler-free, so no worries there. My name is Daniel, I am the host today, and I am joined by the Cordyceps crew. We are back after 2 years. Did I think I was going to forget the name of that? Did it just come to me right now?
Was it 100%. Cordyceps crew, or was it like the fun guys? Wasn't it? No, it was Cordyceps crew.
I think we were like workshopping.
We shot the line. Oh no, he's back.
Labyrinth.
I know. He's back again.
That's the mushroom.
We are back talking about The Last of Us HBO series. I cannot believe it's been 2 years since we've spoken about the show. There's been so much speculation. There's been so much hype and discussion about what this season was going to look like, and we are finally here. Of course, if you like what we're doing here at the Movie Podcast, consider subscribing. Give us 5 stars on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever you are. We love what we're doing. We're so excited to be talking about this show. The Last of Us means so much to us, and to be here talking about the HBO series is a privilege that we do not take lightly. Before we get to the festivities, before we get to our thoughts, let's address some things right out of the gate. Like I said at the top of the show, we will not be discussing any spoilers for The Last of Us Season 2. We have played the game multiple times. We will not be revealing anything from the game. We will not be revealing any future spoilers, anything like that. So you could watch this if you're coming in fresh, knowing that, hey, the Movie Podcast has my back. These fun guys aren't going to spoil anything about the fun guy. So don't worry there. Also, we will be doing our weekly after show that's going to be out at 10 p.m. following every new episode of The Last of Us. That is all 7 episodes we'll have an after show for. So if you want to hear us go full spoiler mode, again, spoilers for those specific episodes, no future spoilers. We may make some game comparisons, but again, that is for the after show. That is for a week or so from now. Today, you are completely safe. You are in the warm embrace of our tendrils. Don't you worry there. I know it's so awful to say that, the tendrils, just don't
like it. I don't like it at all.
Just warning. Before we get to our actual thoughts on the series, I did want to ask both of you, I'd love to know your thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2 game. That is a game that came out in 2020, 5 years ago. This June, The Last of Us came out, and it's also like, when you think of the span of that, and like, is this the fastest, or it's close enough? Like, this is the fastest we've almost had a video game be adapted to series right away. Like, that's crazy to think that 5 years ago this was a game. 5 years later, this is a season of television. Anthony, I would love for you to start us off. Give us your thoughts for The Last of Us Part 2 video game.
It's fantastic. It's a great game. It's like one of those games that it's timeless. It's that game that you remember where you were when it came out, and I think it was COVID for us.
We were all home. It's easy. I was right here.
But man, it's just that game, the story, the characters, everything that happens in that experience. It's you. I think if you haven't played the game, as an audience member, if you're gonna watch the show, you gotta play the game or watch the game on YouTube after you watch the show, because the game I will always look at as the the groundbreakingness of storytelling in video games. You know, like it was so mature for what it was telling. It was so deep. It was emotionally connected. It was very cinematic. It had everything you wanted in a story, but you be able to play these characters. And, you know, I sometimes wish, where's Last of Us 3? Where's Last of Us 4? But, you know, it's definitely something that I treasure a lot and I go back to a lot. And I just can't see anything else narratively being that good.
It's hard when you have games like that because, you know, I put Naughty Dog in that realm of people like Rockstar Games, where it's like, once you've played that game, once you played The Last of Us Part 2 or the first Last of Us or Uncharted 4 or whatever you're playing from them, everything else you play after that, you're just like, damn, that was such high. That was the highest of highs. And it's hard for anything to follow that, right? And I'm like you, Anthony, like, I remember that first night getting the game, Shay and I playing till like 6:30 in the morning, playing that. Like, you just kept going because you were just so enthralled in the story that was being told to you. And again, that almost, like, I always look at the game as like the game is always The Last of Us. The show is incredible, but the game is where the story really, you know,
like the
fully,
Bible, you know,
like, shines. This is the Bible. This is the golden path. This is what you're experiencing, what you're wanting, to really expand on who these characters are and what this game is. And again, you know, Neil Druckmann was asked, you know, he says we don't have plans for 3, and then he kind of walked that back saying, well, we'll see what happens. And then the last version that just came out was saying, yeah, we're always looking at potential futures of this story. So again, I definitely think we're going to get Last of Us Part 3. But Shay, how about you? Where are you at with the Last of Us Part 2 game?
It's one of my favorite games of all time, and I know that, you know, we've all played it ad nauseum to the point where we're so familiar with the Easter eggs of the game. We're so familiar with the nuances. We know how certain characters deliver certain lines in the game. So there's a deep love for the game that we have because, like Anthony, you were saying, that level of storytelling that The Last of Us Part 2 can do, I don't know. I don't think I've really felt it in any other medium out there. I felt the pain of these characters. I cried with these characters. I've hated the things I've had to do in this game, but it is just it's probably the only game where it challenged me, you know, morally. It challenged my thoughts and my beliefs, especially when you have a big switch that happens in the game. You have moments that happen in the game where you're like, there are parts of that game where I didn't like playing it, but not because of any other reason other than like it goes against my beliefs. But the game challenged that. It makes you go and do things that you don't normally want to do. And that's what I loved so much about it. And I think that's why the game got so much hate online, or I don't want to say so much hate. I think it's just got this really loud negative corner that happened.
Yeah, there's a loud base out there.
There's a loud base out there.
We'll get mad at things that aren't true about the game, and it's just really
they're not able to comprehend, I guess, complex emotions. So I think for those people out there, they just weren't able to understand that element of it. And you know what? That's sad for them. And here we are with this season of the show, and I'm excited. Like this is a story that I really wanted to show my wife, and we started playing the game initially, and then I was like, you know what? Maybe let's just save it for the show, because she was getting very anxious while watching me play, and I don't blame her. But yeah, it's one of the greatest games of all time.
Yeah, and you know, that was also like our first video game kind of spoiler discussion we did with our friends Nate and Matt back in the day, almost like 5 years ago. Again, 5 years ago this summer that we did that, and I think we spoke for like 2 hours about it. That was a full spoiler cast. So if you want to hear us talk about The Last of Us Part 2, you know, in a different way from 5 years ago, you could go and find that episode. But before we dive into our first reaction, I did want to let you know that we were sent a letter from Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin, obviously Craig Mazin being the showrunner, alongside Neil, who's the creator of The Last of Us. And I want to quickly read this again, just for getting our mindsets on kind of what we're getting into. And this is what we were sent as reviewers. We're so excited and proud to share advanced episodes of Season 2 of The Last of Us with you. As you'll hopefully discover as you watch, our show has grown up just as Ellie has, exploring themes, behaviors, and outcomes that are intended to be as beautiful and elegant and brutal and difficult as only the human heart can evoke. Of course, you'll be the judge whether or not we succeeded. We would like to ask one favor, though, as best as you can. We would love if you would avoid giving away major plot points in your reviews. Side note, as we did, nothing from us here at the Movie Podcast. We know that many people watch our show and have played the games, so some events will not be surprising to them. But then again, some events will, because they are original to the show. For those who haven't played the games, it's all meant to be experienced in the moment, without forewarning or context. To the extent that you can, give the audiences the opportunity to experience the show just as you are experiencing now, without significant advanced knowledge of any major story points, we would be deeply appreciative. But we're also writers, and we can see how we'll be challenging, so we get it. Honestly, mostly, we just hope that you could find the show worthwhile. We gave it our all. Gratefully, Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann. So again, we're going into this. We are staying completely spoiler-free on this review. We will be breaking the show down weekly, starting for release day. I want to say a huge thank you to our friends at Crave Canada for inviting us to watch these episodes, to HBO for sending the episodes our way. We love working with them. We have a huge show and plans for the show weekly. So make sure you tune in on the Movie Podcast, wherever you are. Our show notes will have all the links you need to know and more. And we will have a Discord channel open. Again, I know this was a bigger opening than we normally have for the Movie Podcast, but there's a lot of ground to cover in a show like this, and we want to make sure that we're giving you the best experience. There are some incredible directors who have worked on the season. It is 7 episodes long. It is airing April 13th, weekly until May 25th. You will see some familiar names like Craig Mazin, Mark Malloy, Kate Heron, friend of the show, Neil Druckmann, and some other great directors who are part of this. But Anthony, please start us off. Give us your first reactions to The Last of Us Season 2.
When you have a showrunner like Craig Mazin who understands the story and its characters, you get a series that feels deeply authentic, where every moment crafted with intention, delivering both emotional weight and narrative depth. And that's what Last of Us 2 is. We just talked about the game and how much we connected to the story. And that's where Craig just takes that story and makes it live action. And he understands he understands the humanity that revolves around The Last of Us. And it's not just the monsters that are, a big part of that world, but it's what happens when we're put in a situation like this, where we go as, a human to another human, how dark it can really get. And I think The Last of Us Season 2 is very faithful to the game, and it adds enough surprises that you really feel fully immersed. You feel the detail. You see the production design. If you've played the game, you're going to see set designs that are very familiar to the game. You're going to see Jackson. That just feels like, wow, they just pulled this right out of epilogue 1 of Last of Us 2. It shows Seattle in a way that you're just like, wow, like whoever was designing the set pieces for this show was literally like for like pulling them right from the video game and building it. Because as you watch it, you're like, I know this part, I know that part. Oh, don't jump out that window. Don't jump out this way. Like it's just, it's fascinating to watch something like that accurate and that like detailed. And you're like, man, the team behind this series did a fantastic job. I think performances continue to deliver. I think Pedro Pascal is always there. He plays an older Joel. Like this is 5 years after the last season, so he's a little bit more gruffier, but like he has a distinguished look. He feels more at peace of where he is at that point in his life. You'll have Ellie who is just trying to find herself, and I think Bella Ramsey continues to deliver that performance. Like if I close my eyes, I hear Ellie. Like I think that's the big thing for me. I sometimes don't see it visually because Ellie has such a distinguished look, in the video game, but in the series, when you close your eyes and you just listen to her talk, it's like, damn, that's her. She just does a great job of creating that character. Another character that really connected with me is Isabela Merced, who plays Dina, who's a big part of this series. And just the chemistry Bella Ramsey has with Isabela is just, it's almost like they were just meant to be. Like, the casting of this series, fantastic. Other things that, like, I can't really, it's hard to not talk about some of the things that I want to talk about without spoiling things, but I will say,
give them all the spoilers. Tell all the spoilers right now.
And no, I think this season really shows, and I think for the audience, it's going to really show how bleak this world is. I think the cycle of violence, which is a big part of the Last of Us narrative, and how it continues to roll around and around and around and around, where even you, like you said it, Shay, like it challenged you. You will feel like, fuck, like just stop doing what you're doing. But that's the point of this series, and the video game was to show like who the real monsters are and how dark it can really get.
We're in a world now that we're getting so many video game adaptations, whether it's a series, whether it's a movie. We are so lucky that we live in the timeline where they're getting The Last of Us rights. And again, we knew before, again, we spoke about this back in the day in our after show, where it's like, there's that world, that multiverse world where they got the Sam Raimi produced Last of Us, and maybe it was a great movie, but you need a series like this to really expand. And I think as a deep and diehard fan of The Last of Us, like we all are, what's so exciting about watching this show is seeing where it's different, seeing where, in the game, it's these characters, but in the show, that's an interesting way you're pairing these two characters together instead. And it's almost like a multiverse version of it to pull in like that way of talking about it. But it's just really interesting when you start to think about the reasons why they do that. Is this to, I'm thinking like as a writer, as a showrunner, we're going to put these characters together because I think this is going to build their relationship. So when this happens later, this makes more sense because we are on a condensed timeline. Yes, the events in the game unfold in the same amount of time as they do in the game, but we're not spending dozens of hours with these characters. We're spending 7 hours with these characters because this is a 7-episode season. So there's a lot of little things that they do to try and build the relationships differently. And I think it really works. And in any other thing that you would watch, it would be interesting to be like, oh, that's not faithful to the game. But this is very faithful to the game. Everything that happens in this show is faithful to what we've played in the games, but there are different routes that it takes to get there, and the journey that they take to get there is a little different. And that's what's so fun about it. Are there things that in my eyes when I was watching it, I'm like, oh, that's not accurate. That's not how it happened. Yeah, that's going to happen, of course. But again, you see the bigger picture, and I think this is the same issue we had in the first season where we watched it. We're like, oh, sometimes things don't hit as hard as they did in the game. But then you're thinking about, well, yeah, in the game, I'm spending, 30 hours playing this story, where in a show, I'm not becoming them. I'm watching them. This is a passive experience. When you're playing a video game, you are becoming Ellie. You are becoming Joel. You are in those worlds. You are exploring those corridors together. They are an extension of you. So you really get to be controlling them and be the soul of them when you're going through these stories. So you feel a little bit more. And, and Anthony, you mentioned, obviously, I think Bella Ramsey is phenomenal, but I also think there's some places that Ellie goes to in the games on this darker path that I don't think we fully got there with her performance. And again, she's an incredible performer. She is an amazing Ellie. I love her as Ellie, but there are some, friend of the show. We had her on the show a couple of years ago, but there are some moments where I really wish that she turned up that anger that you really wanted to be like raging with her, where we saw in the game. But again, different performance. She's putting her spin on it, so I cannot fault her for that. But I think because we are so familiar with how the game ran out, that's how we're kind of feeling those things there.
I think what you're trying to describe, Daniel, here is there's an angst to Ellie that we really get in the game. And again, there's a lot of built up tension, and that is something that I think, maybe Bella isn't completely hitting with the character. But again, like you even said, Anthony, before, like when you close your eyes and you're listening to the character, I hear Ellie and I see it too when I look at her. But there are just certain moments where you kind of want it dialed up a little bit more, because that point needs to hit a bit harder. That reaction needs to be a little bit more justified there. And because it carries weight. And I think when you have a game that's about 32 plus hours long and you're condensing that down into a show, the best way to do that is really emphasizing certain moments that I don't think maybe get the love and attention that they needed this season. But is it a minor gripe? Yeah, it really is. But here we are trying to give you all that we possibly can.
And the series is not as brutal as the game can be. Like the game, when you go through, you think this is going to be bleak. Like the game puts you just don't want to do anything after, finishing that game. So even when you do things with Ellie, it feels like there's anger behind it. And it's harder to have that connection when you're watching someone.
Yeah. And, and speaking of performances, I wanted to highlight some of the other performances in this series. Obviously, Pedro Pascal, always amazing, playing a bit more of a gruffer Joel, like Anthony was saying. He is phenomenal. He is so well used. As somebody who is popping up in as many things as he is, and we've spoken about this, I think every time he does pop up, you're like, this guy is like, I feel like Pedro's like, why hasn't this guy been a movie star for like 30 years? You know what I mean? It's just crazy that I feel like it's been really the last like 6-7 years that this guy's appeared on people's radar properly, now that he's appearing everywhere. But I really wanted to call out Jeffrey Wright, who is reprising his role as Isaac from the game series. He's another one who is now showing up in this, and another Canadian queen Catherine O'Hara as Gail, a new character for the show. And again, whenever you're like, oh, you're introducing a new character, okay, that's interesting. I think she's used really, really well in the series, and her performance in this series is fantastic. Obviously, Isabela Merced as Dina, I think is wonderful casting. I think her more than anybody kind of just slipped into the role. Like in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm always going to think of her as Dina now. And it's interesting when like performances like that could sometimes like take over what I knew in the game. Obviously, both performances are incredible, but it's like, oh wow, she is just amazing as Dina, and I totally believe her relationship with Ellie in this, and where they go and how they kind of develop and grow together. It's really interesting to see that. I think she was so just fantastic in this series.
Yeah, I think, when you look at someone like Isabela Merced, I knew she'd be fantastic. We all knew she'd be great because we've seen her previous work, but she took a character like Dina that was always great in the games, but made it so much better. And it's because of her chemistry with Bella Ramsey. I buy this Dina and this Ellie being so in love and just so, in each other's faces. I get it. I get what they have. There's this level of attitude and sass that Isabela brings to Dina that really, really works. And it's just a really damn good portrayal. I think, like you said, you have a lot of these people who slip right into their roles. Pedro Pascal as Joel, fantastic. But Isabela Merced really took what Dina is from the game and made it even better.
Now, we've gone almost 25 minutes in this review without saying one name, and that name is Abby. Kaitlyn Dever as Abby.
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show. We just had her on a couple of weeks ago, or a month ago now at this point. Abby's a character that is complicated. I actually really enjoy her character in the video game. There are things tied to this character that obviously we're not going to spoil. But I would love to know, just from a performance standpoint, what we've gone from Kaitlyn this season so far. How are we feeling about this portrayal of Abby? It's very faithful to the game. A little different in the sense of the physical appearance, where Abby in the video game is, yoked and like really strong. And she kind of goes on this, this journey of like, I'm going to make myself strong and better because of events that have happened in this world, with the world ending. Little different. Again, that doesn't matter. Again, physical appearance, it doesn't matter. Like, it's the same story that we're going on with this character. But I'd love just to know from your perspective, how do we feel about Abby as a character in this adaptation versus what we've gone in the games. And Anthony, we can start with you.
I don't like Abby no matter what. I just don't.
Abby hate a number one right over here.
I hate Abby.
It's hard to like her character. I understand. As a character, I dislike her. But performance-wise, yes, she's fantastic. Like it happens within the first minute of this episode, the first episode. You know what she's planning to do, and her focus on getting to do that thing,
and her motive as well.
Yeah, and I think with her, she didn't have to be jacked. I think how we see her is perfectly fine. I think I actually enjoy her more this way. Being strong is not always having muscles. Like, you can still be strong without being this jacked person. So I think fans of the game will enjoy the character of Abby and the performance, and I think a lot of people will be joining my boat and disliking her by the end of it.
It's interesting though, because that's again, staying spoiler free. We'll get into this in our after show. But there's some reveals that happen throughout this 7 episodes that we've seen that are in different orders of how it's revealed to us in the game. So it's one of those things where you're like, oh, it's interesting that we're revealing this motive now, not later on. But again, you're like, okay, we're adapting this for a show. It's got to be a little bit different. We got to make sure that general audiences kind of get what's going on. Shahbaz, how about you?
I totally get Anthony. I do not love Abby. I do like her though, and I think the reason why I like her is the challenges that I mentioned before. I think Kaitlyn Dever, as soon as she was announced as Abby, I was like, I get it. That is one person that I think is going to absolutely nail this character. What a complex character, and the fact that we get the motive reveal so quickly in this show, I'm not gonna lie, it kind of threw me for a loop. I was like, oh, okay. Is that going to help audiences or is it going to detract audiences? Because that was the biggest point of the game. In the game, you're going for so long, like, I fucking hate this bitch, and you're going for so long. And then in this show, I'm like, oh, I fucking hate this bitch, but also I'm like, interesting that you're telling us right away what she's doing and why she's doing it. How it all plays out is also really well done. I think, Daniel, you alluded to these characters being switched around. You alluded to these, different perspectives being happening. And I get it. I get it. For the sake of telling a story, you got to speed things up. And this is the best way to do it without having any plot holes. You do it this way, you do it really well. And they did a fantastic job. And Kaitlyn is great. She's so damn good. She portrays that anger and that hatred. And I think one thing that Abby has always been as well is someone that's very calculated and very methodical. She's very smart. And while she was always very jacked, I think this time they made her brain maybe like an 8-pack. Maybe that's why
the brain,
the muscles have gone into her brain, because man, she's very intelligent. But I also do think that she could kick my ass. Like, I absolutely look at her and I'm like, yeah, you know what? She took me on. I probably would lose, because there is this tactical element to her that really plays out well. And I think Kaitlyn does a phenomenal job of that.
The last thing I want to talk about with both of you before we wrap up, give our final recommendations. Again, we're staying spoiler free if I haven't told you enough in the last 30 minutes, but it's been very vocal about how they are adapting season 2 of The Last of Us Part 2, that this is going to be something that is going to be taking place over 2 seasons, maybe even 3 seasons. There is a clear ending in season 2 that obviously is open up to, what's going to come next in the game. It is not adapting everything. It's a lot to adapt even in what they did in 7 episodes. So I would just love to know, how did you guys feel about where the season ended off? Again, we're not saying where the season ended off. Was it enough time? And what are you hoping, I guess, where they go from here in terms of adapting it longer, as much as you could kind of dance and tiptoe around that without saying any spoilers. But Shay, how about you? How are you feeling about where the season ended?
I mean, I think the second that we heard that they're going to be doing a Last of Us show, and we started to kind of piece together that there's no way they can do Last of Us Part 2 in one season, we all started to kind of place our own bets of where we think the show or the first or the second season would end. And I think we were all right. I think we all knew where it was gonna stop, and I think they did it perfectly. I was literally just looking at the time codes, and I'm like, oh, we're getting there. We're about to end off.
We know exactly where
I
heading.
think we're going. And I think it's possible to take, the last 2 acts, I guess, of this game and really push it to 2 more seasons. In the 7 episodes, it's actually remarkable how much they were able to do. Do I think they cut a lot out? Sort of, yeah. Like they did, but they also put a lot in, if that makes sense, because we're getting, like you said, a lot of stuff that happens much later in the game, so much earlier on that I was like, oh, we're already introducing this element in here. Interesting. And I think that plays really, really well with this, because you have these characters that are going through this really complex scenario. Why drag it out for so long? It sets audiences up, I think, the best way. There is a cut to black that happens at the end of the last episode that I was like, oh my God, if they're ending the show here, people are going to be pissed. But they gave us a little bit more that I'm like, okay, you know what? You're not going to completely piss people off here. You're going to make people at least go like, I need to know what happens next. It ends in a really good spot. I have a strong feeling of how the next season is going to go. And if they do then a season after that, what that's going to be as well, because there's a lot to adapt. How much they were able to cram in this one season, I'm very, very impressed by, but they did a really damn good job of it.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how they did and how much ground they cover. I would have loved 10 episodes this season, or at least give us 9, because last season was 9 episodes as well. It was 9 episodes. So we kind of lost 2 episodes. I wish the episodes were either a little bit longer or we got an extra episode of 2. Just to spend more time with these characters, to live in these moments longer. But then again, I'm just like, well, if I want more time with these characters, guess what I could go turn on and play and experience? It's like, am I wanting a one-to-one creation of what I already have? No, this is this version of experiencing it. I already have that version. So it's interesting to see how they're adapting. But again, I think if I am just looking at this from a story standpoint, at least 8 episodes, I think would have given a little bit more time to
a little
stay
bit more
and
flesh
hang out with these characters. Yeah, just a little bit more, give me a little bit more meat on the bones to really, because it's very lean this season.
Very lean.
There's moments where it's just like, we're just getting to this point happens, this point happens, this point happens, this point happens.
It's
I
impressive.
Wish we had a little bit more time. It is. It's really impressive. I really wish, though, we had some time to linger and to breathe. And I think this game, or the game gives you moments to breathe. But this series is really just like, let's fucking go. Anthony.
I think the season's missing that bottle episode. Like that bottle episode where it's not like, I guess
the Bill and Frank episode.
Yeah, like something so different you just didn't expect it. And I think they really focused on getting this story across. And it is, when I say it's like the fastest I've ever gone through a series, it was shocking, but it's so well paced and it's very thrilling from beginning to end. You understand why you end on 7. I think an episode 8 of a story of characters that we were introduced to in the beginning of this of the first couple of episodes, I was hoping for. I was hoping for a bottle story that shared something that we kind of got in episode 7, but it never really fleshed out. But I'm okay with how it ended. I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm excited to see, that prologue, if they continue the prologue in another season or if they just tell it in the next season. I just wish everything was done and ready to go so we can watch it all at once, you know?
No more waiting.
No more waiting.
Guys. AI, get this going.
Oh no.
I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding.
You know what? I did want to touch on something. I think that a lot of people, including ourselves, one of the things that we kind of had an issue with in the first season was there was a little bit of a lack of infected. You know, like we were like, oh, I wish there were more infected. I wish we were kind of seeing a bit more of the clickers and of just the runners and et cetera and et cetera. And there's a lot more that happens this season, which we can't talk about. I think this season addresses that completely. There are some new additions in terms of story that happen that you see in the trailer when you see hordes running at them. Some of my favorite moments this season were those moments because it really drove the tension. So if you had an issue last season of like, hey, I didn't get that many infected, this world doesn't seem so bad, I'd live in it. That problem's not gonna exist this season. You will be seeing why it is bad to live in an apocalypse. You know, it's not great.
No, I'm a fun guy. Where are my fun guys?
Where my fun guys at?
You know, we're the Go to Step crew.
Go to Step CC.
Let's get to our final recommendations for The Last of Us Season 2. I'm going to start things off. I'm going to change things up. You know, I'm just going to go right into it. You know, this is a groundbreaking. This is a masterful recreation, adaptation, whatever you want to call this, of one of the greatest video games of all time. I think you have some of the best performances on TV. You have a series that is taking a video game that was already so cinematic and doing its own thing with it, going down different paths. I love The Last of Us Part 2 so much, and to see what they've done with this season only makes me even more excited to see where things are going to go in Season 3 and Season 4. I really hope on the game side this isn't the end of this world, because I want to see more of these characters. And I think Pedro Pascal, Bella Ramsey, Kaitlyn Dever, Catherine O'Hara, like these characters are so well used. Isabela Merced, another one. It's phenomenal. And if you love the first season of The Last of Us, you're going to love Season 2. Is it going to challenge you? You bet your ass it is. But I think that's what's so great about a series like this, that you could go 5 years later. You could challenge the viewer. You could have characters grow. And I really hope that we're not waiting another 2 years for the next season, because I want to see, I know where the story goes, but I want to know where this story goes. I love it. You need to watch it weekly. Shahbaz.
I'm right there with you. This is a groundbreaking, masterful adaptation of one of the most beloved games that we've ever had.
Did you just say the exact same thing that I said?
Did you say that part?
I just said, I didn't say the most beloved game. I said one of the best games of all time, but you said the exact same sentence.
I'll be honest. I was thinking too much about what I wanted to say that I didn't listen to what you were saying. We can cut that out, or we can keep it in.
No. We keep it in. We roll with it. It's good.
If you said anything else that I'm going to say, I apologize. But it is just fantastic. It is done so well. It takes what we already know and gives us a little bit of a twist. It lets us know that, hey, you're not always safe when you love a game and when you know where a game is about to go. It's got brilliant performances, and it continues to be one of the most appointment-driven shows that you need to be watching.
Anthony.
It's masterful. It's everything Daniel and Shay said times
Wait
1
a minute.
million.
Wait a minute.
Last of Us Season 2 it just shatters all expectations. I think for someone who's played this game religiously, I was left with enough surprises and enough of the live action version of the story where I'm like, man, this is they're doing it so good. I'm letting them cook, you know, like let these guys cook, because there was nothing in this season where I was like, nah, that doesn't work, or I don't like this. And there's little tidbits here and there, but it's such a razor sharp of a knife of a season. I don't know if that makes sense. Razor sharp knife of a season that when you go through it and when you replay it again over and over again, you're going to find little things that you've missed. You're going to see the little mannerisms and in the story where they're hinting at things or planting those seeds. And you're going to see the performances, and you're just going to be like, man, this is a phenomenal season. The only issue I have is it's one part of a season. There should be two. This should be like 24 episodes, you know, like they should have just filmed it all at once. I think that's my biggest gripe. Like, just what are you waiting for? You know, don't wait another 2 years to do part 2. Do everything as once, you know?
I was waiting. This is the first. Anthony just right at that moment. This whole review. Anthony was just like, I'm William Shakespeare writing and speaking so eloquently, and then at the end, he's just elimination chamber. Just give me the season. I will fight you right now.
You son of a bitch.
You know, I love it. But again, that is the movie podcast review of The Last of Us HBO season 2. Again, thank you to our friends at Crave, at HBO for sending us the episodes to watch. We will be back weekly, breaking every single episode down starting on April 13th, premiere night at 10 p.m. Make sure you tune in on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you are. The movie podcast is there. Join us on Discord. We'll be talking about it every single week in our spoiler room. You don't want to miss any of it. We have some really cool opportunities happening. This week, we are in CinemaCon. We are in Vegas. We are in Australia. I'm not too sure where in the world that we are right now by the time this episode is coming out. I think we're in Australia. We're down under. We're in the upside down. Did Anthony get beat up by a kangaroo, or did he save Shayna from a koala bear? We don't know.
Wait,
it is uncharted territory.
No, it's a border agent.
No, it's not a border agent.
No, we got our visas cleared. We're good.
We got cleared. But again, it's just so funny that I think about where the movie podcast was 2 years ago when we were doing the first review for The Last of Us and where we are now. Just absolutely unreal, crazy opportunities. We're just so grateful. And I know we've spoken a lot of shit about Australia over the years about their, killer snakes and spiders, but
that's why we got invited to come to Australia, because they heard. They were like, come on over here, mate. Yeah, take a look.
Have a good time.
Take a look here.
We'll see what happens.
Isn't it The Simpsons where the guy comes out with the big boot? And
big boot, yeah. He kicks Bart in the ass.
That's what we're waiting for when we get off the plane.
What's the word?
We'll see what happens. But until then, that was This Time with the Movie Podcast, and we'll see you next.